It is a special crossover edition of Locked On Heat and Locked On Cavs. How will both teams approach Game 2, and what's the one place where the Heat have the edge?
You are Locked On NBA Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat and Locked On Cavs, a crossover episode hitting your feeds today, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. From Locked On Heat, I'm Wes Goldberg, here with my co-host David Ramil, and joining us from Locked On Cavs, we've got Danny Cunningham. And for daily content on the Heat and the Cavs, make sure you're clicking that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you are following us on your favorite podcast app. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Got a jam-packed show for you today. We're going to hit this Cavs Heat series from all angles. We got the 1 versus the 8. But, Danny, I want to start with you because we have not talked. There was just such a quick turnaround between the play-in tournament ending on Friday night when the Heat beat the Hawks to Game 1 of this series on Sunday night. So we didn't get a chance to jump on and do a crossover. So we're doing it now. But I want to kind of go back before we go forward. When the Heat beat Atlanta in that final play-in game, what were some of your thoughts initially on the matchup? And when you're kind of watching this play-in tournament play out throughout that week, are you just sort of watching the Heat and you're like, is that the best matchup for Cleveland? Is it the worst matchup for Cleveland? What were your just initial thoughts on this matchup?
So I think it's kind of hard to do like best and worst when you're talking about a 64-win team against a play-in team. Like that is the case. And I know Miami has obviously had success out of this spot before, but that's the situation where like it should not matter if you're the Cavs who they face. Mm-hmm. That said, I thought Atlanta and Chicago would have just been cakewalks for Cleveland. I thought that the two teams that could have pushed the Cavs that were in the play-in were the Florida teams. I thought Orlando was going to be super physical with whoever they play, whether it be Boston as the 7 seed, which we know is now the case, obviously, or if they drop down to 8 and face the Cavs. I thought, okay, the Magic are going to push somebody physically. And I thought that, Miami's not going to push the Cavs in the same way physically as Orlando probably would have. But I do think that they're going to push the Cavs in ways that I don't think Atlanta or Chicago were capable of. So I thought this is, despite the fact that Miami had the worst record, despite the fact that they finished 10th in the Eastern Conference and had one of the strangest seasons ever, they're going to give the Cavs a test. It's still a series. I felt that the Cavs should win. I felt the Cavs should look good, all of those things. But it also was like, okay, this is not going to be a typical 1 versus 8. And I also thought, too, it was a good thing for the Cavs that Miami did it, because Miami's history in this spot, I think, automatically brings them more attention. And I do think that as the Cavs being the 1 seed, being a 64-win team, doing all those things they did to earn this spot, it could have been easy for them to overlook a first-round opponent. And, maybe that means you kick a game or you come out rusty. I don't know. But because Miami has done this before, I think that they've earned more respect and more attention from the Cavs here than I think Atlanta or Chicago would have. So I think ultimately it will be a good thing for them. And of course, on a personal level, I thought, I get to go to Miami. There's not much wrong with that.
David, what were your thoughts about Cleveland just throughout the season? Because the Athletic did their player poll, kind of player survey this morning, and the Cavs were not given much of a chance by the players that were polled to come out of the Eastern Conference. It's pretty overwhelmingly the Boston Celtics are going to win the Eastern Conference. And my take all along, the Cavs have been awesome all year. 2 separate 15-plus game win streaks. I mean, my take all along was if they were wearing Lakers jerseys, they would be the favorites in the NBA. But people just have a hard time associating the garnet and gold without LeBron James wearing one of those jerseys with a favorite, with a legitimate contender. But that team is awesome and presents all kinds of matchup issues for not just the Heat, but most teams in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's well said. They're certainly a really good team, and I don't think it's a disrespectful thing to discount them at the same time, because unfortunately every team has to go through that. Like, you have to be able to prove it at the biggest stage in order to say that you can do it. And until you reach that point, every team is kind of written off in that way. And despite how good Cleveland is, and that is, you can have both things. Both things can be true. Cleveland is a very good team, and at the same time, you can have doubts about whether or not they're going to be able to beat a team in Boston that's already proven that they can do this thing. So yeah, at the same time, you look at Cleveland. They're really deep. They're really good. They do present all those mismatch opportunities that you created, and they deserve a lot of respect. But you still have to also get to that next level of earning it in order to prove that you can be considered an actual title contender or an NBA champion.
I know we've talked about this, David, but just because we have Danny here, I want to kind of open it back up. But the fact that the season series was played pretty close between Miami and Cleveland, 3 games decided by a total of 16 points, Miami winning one of those 3 matchups. You and I think agreed. You can correct me if I'm wrong, David, but I think we agreed that, hey, that's nice for Miami. It's nice that they're confident, and they were confident. And for whatever reason, you talk to guys in that locker room, they weren't scared of Cleveland, even if there was a respect of Cleveland. This is not a team that necessarily struck fear in them. Maybe that should change after losing by 21 points in a Ty Jerome eruption in the fourth quarter. And you're like, oh, wow, we didn't know that they had this about them. But yeah, I think that's where the Heat stood. But I don't know, David. Am I right on that in terms of the confidence level going in? And do you think that should change now after game 1?
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, it's surprising to me talking to a number of fans how much they say, well, we beat them. Like the regular season actually means anything. I wish we could just kind of dispel that notion, because look at what happened with Chicago. I mean, they beat Miami in all their matchups during the regular season, and then kind of looked, they didn't look very good against Miami in the play-in tournament. So it's really interesting to say, well, you beat them once during the regular season. Look, we all know what happened after that. Donovan Mitchell talking about how much he took it personally and everything else like that, and he kind of had a little extra edge to him the next matchup against Miami. So that's what you need to kind of motivate you during the course of the regular season. You need to have these perceived slights to kind of drive you and kind of use as motivation. But the playoffs are its own motivation, and the playoffs are all about making changes at a whole other intensity level and maximizing what talent you do have on the roster. And in that sense, Cleveland has much more talent than Miami does. But I think Miami would have gone into any matchup feeling confident, just because they've been able to accomplish what they have over the last few seasons, that they've been at this level before, that they've been at this stage, that they've been able to get past the play-in tournament in the past, albeit with a certain Jimmy Butler on the roster. So they still have that confidence permeating throughout the locker room, and that's a good thing. But to put it out on the floor and to actually compete against a good team like Cleveland, that's a whole different animal.
Danny, did you put much stock into the regular season meetings?
I didn't, because if you look at them, the one Miami won, obviously Jimmy Butler was still on the team. The 2 that the Cavs won, Jimmy Butler wasn't on the team anymore. I guess he was on the team, but he was not around the team anymore. And Andrew Wiggins didn't play in any of them. Kyle Anderson didn't play in any of them. Not that he's the most impactful guy in the world either, but Miami was just in such a different place in the regular season than what I expect them to be in the postseason. Not that, again, I don't expect them to win the series, but it's hard for me to evaluate really anything Miami did during this regular season, because it was so crazy for them, where you go through the Butler stuff. He's there, and then he's suspended, and then he's back, and then he's there again. And then he's suspended again, and then they're not trading him, and then they do trade him. And it's just like trying to put myself inside that locker room. I think that's a really hard way to operate over the course of a 6-month season. It's like there's so much up in the air, right? Like it's just, I cannot imagine expecting that roster to be consistent. Like I just think that's a really, really hard way to operate organizationally. And I think that's part of the reason why they finished with a 37-45 record. Like you can't look at that team on paper and say, you guys have the talent of a below 500 team. Like that's just, I'm not saying that I think that Miami right now is a talent of a championship contender either, but that team on paper is better than 37 wins. And that's kind of the way that I look at it is, okay, what they did in the regular season is not going to matter because so many things were just weird with them. And I also think too, like you kind of have to look at what's around the games that are played between these two teams. Like the game the Cavs lost was the second night of a back-to-back for Cleveland. They played at 1:00 in Charlotte the day before, which means not only was Miami a back-to-back, but they actually got to Miami early enough to enjoy Miami the day before. So it's like, okay, does that matter? And, you know, you wonder about that. Another game was a back-to-back. Just like it's hard for me to read too much into those matchups. Like I just kind of thought Miami's going to be better in the postseason than what they were in the regular season. The Cavs have to be too, and this is going to be a test no matter if Miami won a game against Cleveland or didn't before the postseason started.
So I've got one more question on Cleveland, like historically, where this matters in Cavs franchise history. And then we're going to get to some of our most interesting matchups of the series next here on a Locked On crossover episode of Locked On Heat and Locked On Cavs.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. And with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Listen, it's the right choice for you. If you want those last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% buying last-minute tickets for sports, concert, comedy, theater, so much more, and they're all in pricing, means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay for. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply, but again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat and Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Before we get into some of the most interesting matchups of this Heat Cavs series, Danny, is this the best Cavs regular season team ever, in your view? Because a couple of those LeBron teams, well, the two stints that LeBron had, he had a 66 win season one of those years.
Right,
There was another 60 plus win season another year. A couple of, obviously, the Kyrie Irving, LeBron, Kevin Love teams are really good. I don't think they ever reached the 60 win mark. Is this the best regular season Cavs team they've ever had?
I think so, because the team that won 66 games back in 2008, 2009 was when LeBron may have been at his athletic peak. I don't think it was his peak as a basketball player, but just like in terms of pure athleticism. I don't know that he was ever better than he was at that point, but the rest of that roster wasn't great. It was LeBron is incredible. And I think the league is in a better place too right now in terms of overall talent than it was back in 2008, 2009, 2010, like that end of the first LeBron Cavs stint. So I do think it's this one. Like, I think that this group is more complete than any team that the Cavs had in that first LeBron era. And then the second LeBron era, like those teams very clearly knew, hey, we're going to be playing into June. These games in December and January and February don't really matter that much. We're going to be a top 2 seed, 2 home court team in the first round. That's kind of what they thought. It's like, okay, just get us to the playoffs and we'll see how it goes. And they made the finals as a 4 seed, LeBron's last year here. So I do think that this is the most complete regular season team. Obviously they have to go out and prove it. And I don't know that anything will surpass the 2016 Cavs just because that was the first Cavs team to do it. The way they did it against Golden State, like I think all that matters. But as far as regular season goes, I do think this is the best Cavs team that we've ever seen.
David, I'm not going to ask you if this is the best regular season Heat team we've ever seen.
It's
but
fine.
Can I read you the depth chart for that Cavs team?
Oh, I know. It's not great.
Mo Williams, Delonte West, LeBron, Anderson Varejao, and Zydrunas Ilgauskas, who also spent some time in Miami. Washed up Ben Wallace coming off the bench for that team. Like, there were some guys coming up. Daniel Gibson was playing a lot of minutes for that group. You just look at that roster and it's just LeBron. It is amazing what he did with that team.
Incredible.
Wins.
And then
absolutely crazy.
And then won 61 games the next year, where the only thing anyone wants to talk about all year is LeBron going to leave? Like, that next year was just is LeBron going to leave Cleveland? I think he left Cleveland. I don't know where I can't remember. But they won 61 games with that hanging over their heads. Like, that kind of might be more impressive than winning 66 the year before.
Well, I argue all the time, even that first year in Miami, it was a borderline miracle that they made the finals with everything that team had to go through on a day-to-day basis. So let's just jump back into the matchup here, though. David, what to you is the most interesting matchup in this series, Heat Cavs?
There's so many, to be honest with you. I'm not sure if I can pinpoint one exactly, but I'd have to say probably the matchup between Bam Adebayo, and I guess it depends on, whether or not Evan Mobley or Jared Allen are picking him up. I think you'll see Mobley more often than not on that matchup, but Either one of them, I guess, having Bam Adebayo be able to capitalize on that matchup or to find ways of exploiting it to his benefit, I think are going to define the series to a large degree, because we saw in game one that he was effective for the most part, but also somewhat limited. And both of them are being such great defenders as they are. They're going to challenge Adebayo pretty regularly. So it's how Adebayo can get his spots, how he can find seams in the defense where he can create opportunities for himself and others, because he is a very good playmaker. And that to me kind of really defines the season, because again, Cleveland has much more top talent than Miami does. But in order for Miami to have even any kind of a chance of making this a competitive series, they're going to need a dominant performance from Adebayo, something we did not get in game one.
This is really the first year where the question of who's better, Bam or Mobley, is a real question. And it feels like on that line graph, we might be at that crossroads point where Mobley's stock is just going up so much that it's getting to the point where it's like, I love Bam. I hate even having this. I'm grossing myself out by even having this conversation. Danny, what to you is the most impressive or most important matchup in this one?
So I think for me, it's not something like between guys wearing sneakers. It's between the coaches. I think that because looking at the postseason bracket for the Cavs and just looking at the teams that made the playoffs, or I guess the postseason, if we want to count the plan, there are not many teams that I look at and say that team is a better coach than Kenny Atkinson. But Miami is one of them. Like Erik Spoelstra is somebody that I regard as one of the best coaches in basketball. And I don't think Kenny Atkinson is quite at that level. I think he'll win Coach of the Year. I think he deserves Coach of the Year. But with everything that Spo has accomplished, it's hard for me to look at him and say, yeah, Kenny Atkinson's better than that guy. I think that getting through this series will ultimately be a really good thing for Kenny Atkinson, not only because the Cavs have to find a way to beat the Heat, but he has to find a way to outcoach Erik Spoelstra in some senses. He doesn't need to run circles around him for the Cavs to win, of course, but he does need to, I think, grow as a coach in this series, and especially considering when he was in Brooklyn, he didn't have a ton of the postseason success, and that's a different conversation for a different day. But the past few years, he spent around Ty Lue with the Clippers and then Steve Kerr and the Golden State Warriors. So I do think that he's grown as a coach from the last time we saw him as a head coach in the playoffs. But I think that he will have to grow more by having to game plan against Erik Spoelstra for a 7-game series. I think that will be a really, really good thing for the Cavs in the long run. But it's one of the things I'm most fascinated to see how it plays out in real time.
David, what do you think about the coaching matchup?
Yeah, I it's interesting because even polling Heat fans, some of them doubt whether or not Erik Spoelstra really is as good as his reputation. And you talk to, we went through this in our crossover with the Locked On Bulls group, and they had nothing but immense respect. So it's always interesting to hear how Erik Spoelstra is valued and respected from other teams and fans of other teams and media members of other teams, because he does have a well-earned reputation as being a very good, if not the best coach, or one of the best coaches in basketball. And yet at the same time, there's only so much he can do. And you have Tyler Herro, you've got Bam, you got Andrew Wiggins, maybe if he shows up, and then you've got some nice complementary role players, but none of that matches up to the depth and quality of that Cavaliers team. And so while that's something that might lead to the occasional win, it's not enough to be able to dominate a series or to win a series. And so there's only so much you can do without the kind of talent that Cleveland has. And so as good as Erik Spoelstra might be, you still have to give the edge to Kenny Atkinson, just because, well, I think he's a proven coach, and I think he's a really good team, and there's a really good team, and he's gotten the most out of them. Like, not a knock on Bickerstaff, was also in the Coach of the Year running, but probably not best suited for that particular group in the Cavaliers uniform. And Atkinson he's been able to kind of get the most out of them from day one. And you could kind of see that as early as training camp, how much they bought into Atkinson's system, and you knew this was going to be a really good team. And then, well, they just wound up being really, really good, like dominating the league for most of it. And so, I ultimately still think that as much of an edge as Miami might have in the coaching department, that edge is far eclipsed by the amount of talent on the Cavaliers roster.
Yeah, so there's this should be a sweep. Like, let's just be like this. You have a 60-something win Cavs team versus the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference. There's no reason why any normal 10th seed should win a game in this series against like a historically dominant regular season Cavs team. But then you see the jerseys that they're wearing, and you see that it's Erik Spoelstra on the sideline. And I don't know how many people are actually picking Cavs in 4. It feels like most people were Cavs in 5. Kind of just the respectful one win for Miami. And I still think that I think Miami will win the game in this series. That's Erik Spoelstra. You know, that's not because they got Alec Burks on a veteran minimum. That's Erik Spoelstra. You know what I mean? Like that's what's going on here. And it's Bam and it's Tyler Herro with the respect that those guys deserve for their history and the season that they've had too. But you know, I go back to 2023, and David, you've heard me say this before, but you think about the two most dominant factors in the 2023 playoffs, which ended up being the Nuggets and the Heat in the finals. It was Nikola Jokic on the Western Conference bracket. And then I thought Erik Spoelstra was the most dominant factor in the Eastern. He just was coaching circles around every matchup that they faced. It was like what Jokic was dealing with in the West. It was like, oh wow, clearly this is now the best player in the universe. And for Spo, I think it was very clear in that moment that he was the best coach in the universe. But you still need the horses at the end of the day. You need to have the talent, and Miami's talent is so far behind.
Has Miami been swept with Erik Spoelstra as head coach? Like, is that a thing that has happened in the playoffs? I can't, forgive me for
Milwaukee?
Not remembering all of
Miami's
the bubble. Because I thought that was a 5-game series.
They get swept by
the year after they were swept.
Yeah,
that was Jimmy Butler saying he was stupidly locked in. So,
yeah,
imagine hosting a podcast called Locked on Heat when he makes that kind of comment and then they get swept by those Bucks. So I did not.
Yeah, that was after
Milwaukee.
the 24-hour off season, right? From the bubble to the next season.
Yeah,
so
for me, it was the Orlando bubble and then covering the draft. And I was like, I have no idea what a Precious Achiuwa is, but hey, kudos to him. Good luck.
We are going to jump into some game 2 adjustments. We already did our deep dive on Locked on Heat. Locked on Cavs have been talking about stuff, but now we've got each other to talk through some of this stuff. What do we actually think is going to happen for the teams that we cover? We're going to talk about that next here on this Locked on crossover episode of Locked on Heat and Locked on Cavs.
Today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also on Xbox? You can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. You can dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. And with 4K streaming, you can watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and so much more. Listen, it's the convenient service for you. If you've got experience gaming or not, this is a perfect way to introduce you into all of the different options that Fire TV offers. So make sure to head over to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On. That's Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. That's Amazon Fire TV, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to this Locked on Heat, Locked on Cavs crossover episode. Let's dive into some game 2 adjustments. Danny, what do you think Cleveland will change, if anything, after that game 1 win?
So I think that the Cavs are going to be more forceful in game 2 of making sure that Evan Mobley is involved on the offensive end. I thought he looked a little timid against Miami in game 1 on Sunday night. I think that is something that, they don't need Evan Mobley to go out and be dominant offensively to win this series. But I do think to accomplish the goals of winning a title that they have, they need him to be very aggressive offensively throughout the entire postseason. I think they're going to make it a point of emphasis to get that started right now. And one thing that I would keep an eye on in game 2 is, who do the Cavs run the first play for? I thought it was incredibly predictable on Sunday that they ran the first play for Max Strus, considering he used to play for Miami. Like, you will often see the Cavs do that kind of thing, or they want to run it for Evan Mobley because they want to make it a point of emphasis. And we've seen at times this year in games where maybe Mobley hasn't been as involved in the fourth quarter, the game before, what Kenny Atkinson will do is the very next game, Evan Mobley has the ball in his hands on the very first play, the very first offensive possession they have. Evan's the one with the basketball. I would be very surprised if that's not the case, just because I was not impressed with what he did offensively against Miami. I think that needs to be better. And the other thing too, and I don't know if this is an adjustment so much as, hey, just play better. The Cavs need more on the wing. Max Strus, I thought, was fine. I actually thought he should have played more in game one than he did, but DeAndre Hunter wasn't very good. Isaac Okoro looked lost offensively. Dean Wade really didn't play much. Like, they need more production from this all of a sudden depth of wings that they do have. So I don't know if that's an adjustment or it's just like, hey, you guys need to be better here. So I don't know if that qualifies, but Mobley certainly does.
David, what do you think?
About Mobley or about my adjustments Miami should make? But either way, I think you're right. Getting Mobley kind of engaged early on seems likely to be the case, and I think just makes I think it makes Cleveland even more dangerous than they already were in game one, just because, I mean, there's so many different weapons and so many different players that you can go to. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. As far as an adjustment that Miami makes,
well,
I think we've talked
before
about.
we get to that part, I'm sorry, but I'm just thinking, what does that mean for Bam? Because we saw how much Tyler Herro had to work on the defensive end and what Cleveland did to him in the spin cycle there. Obviously, Bam is a much better defender than Tyler Herro, but just the fact that you're making him work maybe a little bit more if you're getting Evan Mobley involved, considering how important Bam is on both ends of the court. I don't know. I'm just sort of spitballing here, but it is an interesting thought. I do wonder if it's more of a Bam Mobley focus, that actually could tilt a little bit more Miami's way if Bam has a good game.
Well, yeah, I mean, in game one, it's not like Bam wasn't defending Mobley at a high level. I mean, I know Mobley was kind of off, but I think a lot of that probably had to do with Bam's defense in general. So, I mean, is his defense going to be ratcheted up a notch if they're focusing on Mobley and getting him his touches early on? I don't know that it's necessarily going to change.
Or if more of the game is focused on Mobley going at Bam as opposed to all these guys attacking Tyler Herro. Yeah, that's sort of what I meant. Yeah.
In that case, that probably benefits Miami, I think, pretty considerably, because I don't know that Mobley's going to win in that matchup, certainly as often as any player going up against Herro was winning that matchup. So it probably benefits that. And I think Bam's up for the challenge, and that kind of frees up those opportunities to maybe create turnovers, especially if you can bring a secondary help, because I think Mobley, as good as he is, he can get kind of locked into that process of attacking whatever defender he's on. If he wants to take that challenge personally, he goes directly at Bam, and then all of a sudden you got Wiggins and or somebody else kind of maybe poking the ball free, creating a transition opportunity for Miami. It could work. You know, there's things to consider in that sense.
Who do you think Miami should run their first play for? Because we've talked about the lineup changes. You and I think that they should start Davion Mitchell. We don't have to rehash all of that. Even Danny and I talked about it on the squad show, but go ahead, Danny.
Okay.
Can I ask why Alec Burks starts? Like, I don't understand that.
Spo is obsessed with the spacing part of it, and Burks is kind of the new Terry Rozier in the sense that Terry Rozier has been awful, and they need somebody. And he likes having Duncan Robinson come off the bench, and Robinson and Herro in the backcourt is a disaster defensively. So Alec Burks has held his own. But to your point, he's kind of just been a fill-in starter, and Spo loves these fill-in starters. We call them like the Luke Babbitt starters, where they play 15 minutes and then they're basically. And they'll start these games, and then they'll just go to the bench, and then somebody.
Kevin Love was that last year.
Kevin Love was that last year, but we're at the point now where he hasn't been compelled to change it because they were able to go through the play-in tournament. All this, it's time. Like, that's why everybody just sort of knows it was only a matter of time, and we've reached that moment now. So I would be very surprised if Davion didn't start game 2, but I also was surprised that he wasn't starting in the play-in tournament in these do or die games. So who knows? But I'm thinking about who the Heat should run their first play for. Let me know if you disagree, David. I think it should be Wiggins.
Okay.
They really need to get him going. And we've seen Spo do this too. I mean, every coach does it, where it's like, who's the guy we need to get going? Let's design our first set for him and get him going. And specifically for Wiggins, an inverted pick and roll or something to get him going downhill against maybe a smaller Cleveland defender. That, to me, is the guy who I'd want that first play ran for. If you can get Wiggins coming up from the corner, curling around a screen up high, and then getting right back into the paint and either drawing a foul or just getting a shot off or something, and you get him going a little bit, that is a swing factor. Because if you look at the one place where Miami might have an advantage, it might be at that small forward spot, only if Wiggins is playing the way that they need Wiggins to play.
Yeah, it's a great point because you can make an argument that it should be Tyler because if you can get him going and have him feeling like he's kind of in a rhythm or in a groove, that he'll probably have a much more explosive night than he did in game one. But we've seen Tyler struggle early on and then kind of turn it up throughout the course of the game and still wind up having monstrously productive nights. So I'm not too concerned about that. Similarly with Bam, that's not really your focus. I don't, as much as you probably need Bam to have a big game, he can still kind of get it going later on throughout the game, even if he misses his first couple shots. Eventually, if he knocks down those mid-range jumpers, if he gets a couple threes going, then you know he's feeling it and he'll be fine with whatever production you get with him. But it's Wiggins that's the swing factor. And if he can be aggressive and he can be engaged early on and recognize this might be a good opportunity for him to take advantage of certain matchups, then all of a sudden that raises Miami's ceiling much more considerably. And so, yeah, I think that's a good call.
Do we have a spread
let me ask
on...
you,
Go ahead.
Let me ask you guys this. How come, and Wes, I know that you and I talked about this very briefly on the squad show this week. What do you think Miami needs to do to get to the rim more? Like they only had 5 attempts at the rim in game one. And how much of that is it's the third game in 5 nights in 3 different cities, all of which have been really big games. Like that takes a lot out of you. Just what do you think needs to change for them to be able to not, and they finish at the basket fine. They were 5 of 5, but to get that attempt number much higher.
Yeah, shooting 100% at the basket. I don't see the problem. It is
a new roster, I think, is really the only thing. Because I mean, you don't have ball handlers that are, with the exception of Davion Mitchell, that are quick enough or agile enough to get to the rim or take advantage of whatever matchups they face offensively. And then across the board, aside from Wiggins, who might again present the only mismatch in Miami's favor, Bam's undersized. Like you just don't have the horses there. You don't have the players that can really attack Cleveland's defense as effectively. And so it's just I don't know that there's any other way of guaranteeing it. Like we talked about this in terms of a potential game 2 adjustment, and I don't know how likely it is, but Nikola Jovic, you know, he's 6'11", he's somewhat agile. He's not the quickest guy, obviously, but he seems like if he's ready to go and he's free of injury, then he might be one of those guys that can get to the rim or at least create a mismatch in Miami's favor. But otherwise, you're looking at Miami's roster. They're undersized. They're not particularly explosive. Like your best player or your best scorer in Tyler Herro, I mean, he's struggled with that, and he's going to continue. There are obvious built-in physical limitations that he'll never be able to get past. And so getting to the rim, with him, it's more about finding the right timing or creating an opportunity or seeing that maybe there's a breakdown in the defense and kind of capitalizing it. Otherwise, he's just not going to overpower anybody the way Donovan does.
Yeah, Hero's got to be better just in general. He got stood up by Sam Merrill a couple of times in that game. That
noted defensive stalwart Sam Merrill.
Right. That's not
Kenny
going to fly.
Atkinson gives Sam Merrill defensive credit. Anytime you ask Kenny about Sam, he immediately goes to, well, he's just such a good defender. Because I will ask about, his offensive gravity, and Kenny just immediately points to the defensive side of the basketball. And Cavs fans couldn't stand it because they see Sam and think, oh, this guy's just going to get cooked repeatedly. And he is a little bit better than I think he gets credit for, but that's a matchup Tyler Herro should be winning much more often than he did in game 1.
I love when coaches are just like trying to talk up their guys and that you start talking about Sam Merrill like he's Lou Dort or something. And you're just like, what are we talking about the same player? Like what's going on? No, I think there are ways to get to the basket a little bit more, Danny. I think first of all, we talked about the 3 games in 5 nights and stuff. We might see the Spo's first real game plan of this series in game 2, because I don't know how much time he actually had to prep for game 1. Well, we do know how much time he had to prep for game 1. It was not very long after coming off that Friday night win. But one of the things that stuck out to me, and we talked about this on the show and I wrote about it, but it's not using your smalls in the pick and roll and running more of those. Like Cleveland tore up Miami's defense with those small pick and rolls. They got 15 points generated off of screens involving a wing or a guard in that game. Miami got 0. They got 0 screen assists from guys who were not Bam or Khalil Ware. That was it. And when you look at the guys that you could typically attack on Cleveland, whether it's Sam Merrill or Darius Garland or Ty Jerome, you got to bring those guys into the action. And every time it was traditional pick and roll, and including Mobley or Jared Allen in the action. And those guys are awesome defensively, and that's just not going to work. So I would like to see more inverted pick and rolls using Tyler Herro as a screener, which has happened this season, pretty often, especially in the second half of the season. So more of that to just get those matchups, but that's going to require a big game from Bam and a big game from Wiggins as ball handlers. to take advantage of those, but getting those guys downhill, spreading out Cleveland's defense a little bit more. I think you're going to start getting to the rim more. But again, this is not a team that, to David's point, gets to the rim a ton anyway. But they usually get more. They rim more than 5 times in a game, so it's a matter of kind of splitting that difference and then swapping out some of those mid-range shots for threes. And Cleveland does an awesome job of running those guys off the line. But if you're getting better matchups on the perimeter in general with better screens and more strategic kind of options there, you got to trade out some of those mid-range shots for threes. I mean, that's just point blank what you have to do. And, maybe it ends up being in a little bit of a shootout, but I don't really know how else Miami has a chance in this other than, variance kind of playing a factor.
I will say I was impressed with some of the shots that Miami hit in that game because you bring up, or I guess we both brought up the lack of pressure they put on the rim and they didn't take enough threes, certainly to win a math battle against the Cavs. They took a lot of shots in the mid-range. They made, I thought, a lot of tough shots. Like I thought the Cavs were pretty happy with the looks that they gave up to Miami. And kind of, I do wonder how repeatable is it for Miami to make the shots that they made in game one? Like that to me is like,
can't rely on it.
It felt like they were shooting a little bit above their heads with the quality of look they were getting. Now I expect that quality to be a little bit better just based on their legs shouldn't be as heavy on Wednesday night in game 2. But I do wonder, how is that going to change? Like, are they going to shoot more threes? Because I think they really have to.
No doubt about it. Game 2, Wednesday night. Thanks for making Locked On Podcast Network your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe to Locked On Heat and Locked On Cavs on YouTube and your favorite podcast app for the post-game reactions, and follow along for the rest of the series. Thanks, guys, for jumping on. I guess maybe we'll talk again in this series. I don't know. Maybe not. Who knows?